in the last 4 and more decades, in the last nearly 50 years, I mean, a lot of things have happened in my life and in my mother's life. And when I started to contemplate this book, I realized that how much we had been through and how much drama there had been in our lives, and how intricately connected our lives had been with the changes in China. The years of optimism, of hope that China was heading towards a humane and even democratic and free society, and then but yet how much fear, how much control there was in those years, and how the country changed from poverty-stricken and totally isolated to now rising to be the world number 2 economy, with the ambition of becoming the world's number 1, challenging the supremacy of America. And all these changes were intricately connected, intertwined with my own life and my mother's life. And so, as my previous books, I was telling the story of China through the stories of this family. There are stories about my siblings, inevitably, but the focus of the story is my mother. And in fact, my mother again inspired me to write this book. It was 2023, and my mother was very ill. In fact, she was dying. She didn't die, but she was dying at that moment. And but I couldn't go back to see her because of the books I had written, the Wild Swans, the biography of Mao, particularly, and the biographies of other major historical leaders of China. I mean, those books didn't toe party lines. And so I was persona non grata in China, and I couldn't go back to see my mother. And so I was looking at her through the screen of my mobile, and I saw her extremely weak, but still strong. And then I thought how much I owed this extraordinary woman, my mother. And she gave me my freedom. She helped me gain freedom, and she helped me gain happiness and helped me become a writer. Then I started to think about writing this sequel to Wild Swans. I couldn't interview my mother any longer because she was very ill. She was 2023. She was in her early 90s. But there were many materials. There were tons of letters between my mother and me, and between my friends and me, and my other family members and me. And I kept a diary. I kept notes of all the major events, because my life has also been very dramatic in those decades. Although I had come to the West and live in London, but I was intricately connected with my native country, with China. My freedom, my life was connected with how open China was and at what stage of development the country was. And so my diaries are fascinating, if I may say. But in 2023, I was particularly affected by one law that Chairman Xi Jinping has made. As soon as he made himself the permanent supreme leader of China in 2018, and that law is that anyone who is deemed to have insulted a revolutionary hero is to suffer the penalty of imprisonment. And Mao is the biggest hero of Chairman Xi. And so if I go back to China, a prison would be waiting for me. And so I made the extremely painful decision not to fight to go back to China, which I had been doing in the years before 2018. I had to decide not to go back, and therefore I will not be with my mother at her deathbed. So that was a very heavy and sad decision. How my mother reacted to all the troubles I have had writing my books, and how she had reacted to my last decision is something quite extraordinary. She is a true successor of Mao. Mao had his dream as soon as he seized China, and that was to build China into a military superpower so he could one day dominate the world, which meant to overtake America. And in order to fulfill his dream, he created the biggest famine in the history, man-made famine in the history of China. Around 40 million people died of starvation. And the cause for the famine was that Mao exported food to Russia, to the Soviet bloc, to buy military industries. And China was very poor then, and these foods were what people had to, what people depend on for survival. But Mao didn't care, and his superpower dream was the main drive even at Mao's time. This is something I discovered while writing the biography of Mao with my husband, John Halliday. Now, Mao didn't succeed. He died a sad man. The main reason was that China was poor, and no matter how much food he exported, how many people he starved to death, he couldn't make it. And so he was very sad. And Mr. Xi, when he came to power in 2012, he was determined to carry on Mao's the course left behind by Mao, and to make China the #1 superpower in the world. And this is terrifying for me, because the nature of this ambition is tyrannic, and China is not a better society than America or the West. So I'm terrified at the prospect of one day China takes over the world. And the other thing which is linked with the tyrannical nature of the ambition is that to what extent the regime would go to succeed in this dream. At Mao's time, he would rather sacrifice the lives of tens of millions of people by exporting food to reach his superpower dream. Of course, today, this is not going to happen because the world has changed. China has changed. It's rich compared to those days. And he doesn't, and the current leaders don't need to sacrifice people's lives, but they would go pretty far. And also they are basically communists by nature. I mean, China is still very much a communist communist country with capitalist features. I mean, that's what the regime would like to think it to be. And that's what it is trying to create a society. And that's another terrifying thing. I loved writing. I mean, through writing Wild Swans, it so happened that I got into this writing about things to do with politics, but to do with history. I mean, I've embarked on this route, and my guideline is just one thing: to stick to the truth and to tell the truth. I mean, the truth is a terrifying thing in China, and the regime has directly, explicitly criticized people in general and us, Jung, my husband, and me, for blindly seeking truth. We were condemned as historical nihilism. Um, and yes, I have I've faced the threat. I knew this when I was researching the biography of Mao. I knew this book was dynamite. Indeed, when the book was published, the Time magazine called it an atom bomb of a book. And I knew there would be danger, but I also decided that, come what may, I'll just live a normal life and carry on with my writing, and having my, writer's integrity. But one thing in particular, soon after the publication of the biography of Mao, our house was intruded in a way that was, somebody was sending us a message. I think my principle is I got to be truthful, and whatever I have found to be the truth, I would write. I decided from way back, many years ago, when I was researching the biography of Mao and Wild Swans, and I decided that I would not pull punches. My books would not be worth reading if I pull punches. And I think, since the publication of Wild Swans to today, 34 years have gone by, and I have tens of millions of readers from all over the world. And I think people read my book because I don't pull punches. I think my book will not be worth reading if I do.